Hello, Ron. We are today here with Dr. Daniel Feldmann, and he recently wrote a book on General Model, but it is in French. So I thought I invite him, and we have a talk in English. Welcome, Daniel.
Hello, thank you.
And today we ask a question: was Model Hitler's best defender? I mean, this is always the problem with best generals. I did a few videos on this already. It's hard to determine, but generally, was he, let's put it that way, was he a good defensive general?
Well, yes, I'm not going to go into comparison of who was the best or something. I think,
Of 3,000
yes,
different
I think
generals.
you made great videos about that, and this is a bit of a nonsense when you're doing history. But let's talk about the defensive skills of General Model. So we need to talk a little bit about his career, his various positions, to see when he had an opportunity to fight in defense. His career until 1941 is almost not interesting. He then gets the chance to lead a Panzer division during Operation Barbarossa in 1941. So then he's an attacking general. He's pretty successful with his division, although he almost destroys it in the process. But he's the one closing the big Kiev pocket in September 1941. And then he moves up pretty quickly to army level. So from 1942, Model reached the army command level. He's head of the 9th Army. This army is fighting 150 kilometers west of Moscow. It's holding a salient around the small city of Rej. And this could be a springboard to attack again Moscow, and therefore the Russians were kind of obsessed with reducing it, and they kept attacking it in 1942. And these were the first strong defensive battles of Model. Then the year after, in 1943, during the Battle of Kursk, Model is in charge of the northern side of the attack. This is an attacking situation, he fails. But after a few days, the Soviets counterattack in his back, and Model is gonna do a fighting retreat, evacuating Orel, for example, and this fighting retreat is gonna last until October 1943 or so, when he's removed from command. And then in 1944, he's going pretty much to be in a lot of defensive situation. First, with Army Group North from January 1944. This is when the Russians counterattack from the Leningrad area. Then in April, he's head of Army Group South, renamed Army Group North Ukraine. And when he gets there, a whole Panzer army is surrounded by the Soviet forces. In June, he takes over Army Group Center a few days after the Russians launch the Operation Bagration in Belarus. And finally, in August, he's sent to the Western Front at the point when the Americans have broken through the German lines in Normandy. So he's again fighting in defensive situation. And for the rest of the war, he's going to fight on the Western Front in defense, except for the 2 weeks of a counterattack in the Ardennes Forest, the Bulge, in December 1944. So all in all, let's say, these are years of defensive battles. So in terms of experience in defense, probably no other army general or army group general has such experience. One of the key reasons is Model never gets fired definitively. Most other generals eventually get removed from command, sent to retirement or something, sent to the reserve, and stop fighting. But that's not the case with Model, who from January 42 to April 45, except for a short 2 month period, is fighting, and this is the second half of the war, mostly in defense. So definitely one of the most experienced, if not the most experienced, just by the sum of situation he had to face. But then, a lot of experience, well, was he effective? It's great to be in defensive situation, but if it is about giving up hundreds of kilometers of territory each time, what is it worth? Then the situations are very different depending on the configuration of the front. In 1942, in the Rêve salient, Model is fighting on prepared position. Prepared position that he organized himself. This is not something he heritates from a previous command, but he takes advantage of a rather quiet period in spring to organize static defenses along the whole front. And this is successful in frustrating the Russian attack. Then, if you take the situation in 1944, and this is Army Group North, Army Group South, Army Group Center, and then the Western Front, well, Model is sent there after the Soviets or the American and British have broken through. This is more mobile defense, and that's much less effective. He has to give up hundreds of kilometers of territory almost each time until the front stabilizes, and it's far from obvious that the eventual stabilization of the front is thanks to him rather than the logistics of the attacking armies. And finally, if you consider autumn 1944, and this is the battle, this is Market Garden, these are the battle in Aachen, but especially in Aachen, again, like in 1942, he's fighting on prepared position, and this is much more successful. And finally, there are the battles in 1945. It's not the most studied period of history, even from a military point of view, although they are really interesting. But the key thing to remember is it's only in March 1945 that the Allies managed to break through the German lines. It's first an effort by the British and Canadians in the north. The front was reorganized at that point, and Model wasn't fighting against these guys. So the defense, well, it was a pretty good defense, but it wasn't Model anymore who was in charge of that. But when eventually Model gets attacked in March 1945 by the American army of General Simpson, well, he can't do anything about it, and there is immediate breakthrough of his lines, and he tries a little bit to act like he did against the Soviets during Bagration, and this has absolutely no effect on the Americans. They don't even realize there's some kind of organized defense there. So that's, at the end, just too much, even for him. And this is also when he loses a bridge on the Rhine, the Remagen bridge, it's in his sector. So in the end, the most experienced defensive general, yes, given the number of situations, the time he spent. And effective, pretty effective if he is fighting on prepared position. Even very good. On mobile situation, not convincing.
So in terms of skills and other aspects, I several times read or heard something like he was really good in like getting everyone on the defense, like taking cooks, giving them a rifle basically, and defending. Is this something you came across, or was this done by anyone anyway, or was this something specific Model came up in the Rêve salient or something along those lines?
This is something he did. He didn't really care about military rules whatsoever. So any person, well, men only, he didn't involve women, but any person who could hold a weapon was good enough to go fighting. And that first happened there's a first example in 1942, where he sends to the front young men of 16 or something who were in the rear area during work in the
Reichsarbeitsdienst, yeah.
And these were not trained soldiers at that point, and he gives them a weapon and he sends them fighting. And they, of course, this is a very not many of them survive, but that's one example. This kind of Germans, young Germans, there are no more example of this kind of personnel being in the rear areas of armies later on, maybe because of this situation. Similarly, especially during the Bagration offensive in July 1944, he manages to organize Kampfgruppen with anything that he finds, and these Kampfgruppen go counterattack or try to counterattack the Russians for 1 to 3 days until they are destroyed. And it is really sacrificing these troops, but at least it slows down a little bit the Soviets, because the Soviets, instead of being against, let's say, a static line, have now to be careful about a sudden counterattack. And Model manages to organize plenty of these Kampfgruppen. They are named by local commanders, and when you look at the records, well, the name of the commanders keep changing, because, you send Commander 1, he's good for 3 days, when his unit is destroyed, and then another one, etc. So I don't know whether it's Kursk or whatever, but he does manage to do that. He also understands that this ad hoc organization are especially convenient not to be controlled by higher command. Because these troops are improvised, higher command cannot know what exactly is in there.
So he's not micromanaging them.
Kind of. He's at the army group level, and he's directly commanding Kampfgruppen the size of half of a division. So is that micromanagement? Looks like it. But then he launches them for a given mission, and they are destroyed within 2-3 days, and he's not managing what happens after he launched them.
Ah, okay.
On the one hand, he gets concerned with units which are really far below his level. On the other hand, well, they are expendable assets. He knows that there's not going to be anything left of them after a few days, and then what he gets busy with is trying to find the next one. But really important is this enables him to get some freedom of movement against Berlin or whatever higher hierarchy. It's always an improvised unit. There's no time for whomever to go inspect and understand what this is. And anyway, it gets destroyed in a few days. So he's good at concealing what he's doing for his boss. So he finds both ways. It's kind of convenient to defend, and it's very convenient not to be controlled, not to be micromanaged.
And did the sacrificing of some troops lead to that larger troop formations could be saved, or was this just for buying time?
This is also something where Model goes against the usual rules or habitus of the German army. Whenever a German troop is surrounded, the Germans organize a rescue mission. This is true in Russia, for example, in the north, there's a salient in Demyansk. This is, of course, true with the 6th Army in Stalingrad. There's a rescue mission for that. And you have more examples, like the pockets of the Ubers pocket near Cherkassy later, etc. During Bagration, after a few days of Bagration, you have 2 armies, the 9th and I think the 4th, I'm not exactly sure, which are surrounded by the Russians. When Model takes over, he takes over 6 days after the beginning of the offensive. he does not even consider the option of doing a rescue mission for these guys. He just sent them an order saying, well, try to break through and come back to my lines. Final word. Final word. And this is all the more striking than one of the surrounded army, his former 9th Army. He doesn't care at all. He commanded that army for 1 full year, even more, 15 months. A little later, this is surrounded by the Russian. It has little hope of survival. He doesn't care. So his way goes against all the education and the reflex of the German army. Is it good or not? I don't know, but I see that this is really an exception.
So was this maybe also because Bagration was such a major breakthrough that he was completely aware that it was maybe not possible, or was this? Is there some other channels to compare with where the situation was similar dire?
Yes, it's difficult. Well, we know after the fact that Bagration was such a success. But then, when he gets over, it's only 6 days after the beginning. He does not even consider the idea of launching a rescue.
So it's not that apparent that this will be that major Russian breakthrough.
It is a breakthrough. It is a very big breakthrough. It is a catastrophe. It's clear. I think just looking at the map, when he takes over from Bush, the Army Group Center doesn't really know where his units are. There are holes of tens of kilometers between the units, etc. But he doesn't consider doing a rescue mission. There's no trace of record where he says, one option is trying to rescue them. No, that doesn't exist. There's another example like that in the Western Front. It is after the liberation of Antwerp. You may remember that at the very end of the British advance along the coast of France and Belgium, they eventually managed to reach Antwerp on September the 4th, and the harbor hasn't been destroyed by the Germans. However, Antwerp is deep inside the land, and there's a 50 kilometers long shelled until the sea. And some German troops are on both sides of the shell. They are almost cut off from the rest of the army. It's a matter of 10 or 20 kilometers for them to be completely cut off. Again, Model at that point is head of the army group. He's the boss of the guy, Zangen, I think von Zangen, in charge of the troops almost cut off. He does not consider at any point doing a rescue mission, trying to get them back. Now, they happen to maintain a link to the rest of the army, but it's more because the British don't push through, by luck.
But wasn't the shell then effectively used to basically block the Antwerp harbor?
That what happened, let's say, 1 week later. But then at first the idea, when you look at the record, there was just an order around September 3rd or 2nd, something like that. You find it in the Army Group B record, where there's an order to this troop to try to break through the British line in Belgium, which they can't, so they don't. And after a few days, they happened to keep a lifeline to Germany. And so the situation has changed, and there's another idea, which is, we block the harbor. But that's not the initial intention of Model. The units are almost isolated. They eventually maintain a lifeline, but that's really by luck. You could not predict that in this situation. And at no point Model considered doing a rescue mission.
So, thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you. Thank you, Bernard.
Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye.